Hi, I'm Bob Ferris, an executive advocate with Murphy Business, and welcome to our tutorials on lean turnarounds. Our introduction is titled Why Your Great Idea Was Worthless. And rather than keep you in suspense, the answer is worth is an emergent property of three elements in specific combination. Now, what does that mean, and what does that have to do with your great idea? Well, let's start with your great idea. That represents a model of a possible better future. Of course, the problem we're facing is so many of us have had those and ended up in the long run with a handful of nothing. To explain why, I want to use an analogy from physics. This is a representation of a carbon atom. Here is a simpler one, a hydrogen atom, something a little more complicated, an oxygen atom. If we mix carbon and hydrogen, we get something that's neither one. We get hydrocarbons. And further, if we take oxygen and add that to carbon and hydrogen in the specific ratios that I'm showing here, we get something very interesting. It's called sugar. And what's so interesting about sugar is that sugar is valuable because it has an emergent property. It's sweet. Now, taste does not exist at the atomic level. It's only when we mix these things together that taste emerges. And the same thing is true with wealth. Okay? Some of the ancient alchemists took this idea years ago and started trying to mix base elements in order to create wealth in the form of gold. All right, that whole idea of alchemy had some substance to it. If we take our ideas, our model for the better future, how can we mix them so that we do produce wealth? Well, the first step is, since it's your idea, we need to mix it with your resources and keep changing that mixture around, experimenting with it until we finally get to what we want, which is a profit. Now, profit isn't necessarily wealth. Okay, in order to develop this up to the point where we do have wealth, we need to add scalable business systems. Now, this diagram looks a lot like the previous one, okay, except you'll notice we didn't go through that first stage of you with limited resources and your model producing a minimum profit level. This not only does not produce wealth, this particular model dissipates it. And this thinking has led to the lean startup movement. And the lean startup movement says a startup business first goes through a process of using limited resources to produce a limited profit through customer discovery. And then once we've hit that level, and only then do we build it up, okay, in order to produce market wealth. Now we're going to be taking principles that have been developed first in the book Business Model Generation, which developed organizational business models, and we're going to add to that and primarily take the point of view of the subsequent book, Business Model U, which uses those same principles only from the point of view of an individual. We'll use the personal business model canvas a great deal. The personal business model canvas is described in Business Model U, and the business model canvas for organizations is developed in the first book, Business Model Generation. We're not going to explain them here. We assume you already understand them. Okay, we're going to talk about once you've developed your model, now what do you do? This idea of emergent properties that we're going to be talking about isn't specifically in the book as emergent properties, but you'll see it everywhere. So for example, here in Business Model U, there's an illustration about combining individual skills, interests, and personality, and we find that that combination isn't called sugar, but it is called the career sweet spot. Okay? And this idea that this is kind of like alchemy is not particularly my original thought. One of the authors of Business Model Generation, Alex Osterwalder, has a website, and he has called himself the Business Model Alchemist. In fact, if you look carefully, you'll actually see there's an Emergent Property symbol sitting there amongst the drawings. So what we have here is the reason your idea may have been worthless. It was not put into the right combinations to have wealth emerge, and we're going to talk about exactly how we're going to do that in the future tutorials.